Mayday, mayday, mayday! Air Transat 236. The right engine is flamed out.
Air Transat Flight 236 was cruising quietly through the night sky, making its way from Toronto, Canada to Lisbon, Portugal. It was just past midnight, and the wide-body jet was flying high, 39,000 feet above the vast Atlantic Ocean. Everything seemed routine. The pilots were relaxed, the passengers asleep, and the hum of the engines the only sound slicing through the silence. But little did they know, a hidden threat was slowly building up inside the aircraft. Something that would soon turn this peaceful flight into a fight for survival. At 39,000 feet over open ocean, there's no turning back, no land in sight for thousands of kilometers. And suddenly, the captain noticed something that sent chills down his spine. The fuel was vanishing. Running low on fuel over the Atlantic doesn't just mean trouble. It usually means one thing: a fatal ending. This chilling event took place on August 23, 2001. The aircraft, an Airbus A330, had been prepped at Toronto Pearson Airport for a non-stop flight to Lisbon. To cover the 7-hour journey, ground staff had filled it with 48 metric tons of fuel. Everything appeared normal. Boarding began around 9 p.m., and soon 293 passengers and 13 crew members were on board. At the controls was Captain Robert Piché, a 48-year-old pilot with an impressive 16,000 hours of flying experience. Next to him sat First Officer Dirk Dejager, just 28, but already with 5,000 hours under his belt. 400 of those in this exact model. The aircraft itself was nearly brand new, only 2 years old, packed with the latest tech of the time. With such experienced pilots and a modern plane, nothing could possibly go wrong, right? The plane took off smoothly, climbed to cruising altitude, and settled into its journey over the Atlantic. As is common on long-haul flights, the autopilot was doing most of the work. The pilot's job was simply to monitor the systems and maintain contact with air traffic control. 4 hours in, all was quiet. Most passengers were asleep. The plane had reached the very heart of the Atlantic Ocean. And then, it began. At around 1 a.m. Canadian time, an alert appeared. Engine 2, the right engine, showed unusual oil pressure readings, too high. And not just that, the oil temperature and quantity were dropping, something the pilots had never seen before. They grabbed the flight manual, searching for an explanation. Nothing matched. They contacted Air Transat's maintenance control center, but even the experts were baffled. The advice? Keep monitoring the engine. The readings were strange, but the engine was still running fine, so the pilots assumed it was a faulty sensor. For now, they continued. But just 30 minutes later, another warning popped up. This time, about fuel imbalance. The fuel tanks in the wings didn't match. The right tank was draining faster. Still, this wasn't too alarming. The captain simply opened the crossfeed valve, which allows fuel to transfer from one wing to the other. Problem solved, or so it seemed. But just 10 minutes later, a chilling alert appeared on the screens. Low fuel. This wasn't a glitch. Fuel levels were now dropping dangerously fast. Even worse, combining fuel from both tanks still wouldn't get them to Lisbon. The situation had escalated into a full-blown emergency. Stuck in the middle of the ocean, the pilots had only one real option: a remote island group called the Azores, part of Portugal. The nearest airport, Lajes Field, on Terceira Island. The captain quickly contacted Santa Maria ATC, declaring an emergency and requesting immediate clearance to divert. Fuel levels were now at around 7 tons, which may sound like a lot, but for a massive Airbus A330, that's just 6% of its total capacity, and dropping fast. So what was happening? Another faulty sensor? Or was there an actual leak? To find out, the captain sent cabin crew to check the wings for signs of fuel leaking out. But it was night, pitch black, and no signs could be seen. Yet, the numbers didn't lie. Fuel was disappearing at an alarming rate, 1 ton every 5 minutes. The pilots now knew for certain they had a leak and they were running out of time. There was only enough fuel for 25 more minutes of flight. The airline's maintenance team advised descending to 20,000 feet to further investigate. But Captain Piché made a critical call. He refused. Why? because at lower altitudes, gliding distance decreases. If the engines failed at that height, they'd never make it to the island. And then, disaster struck. Engine 2 caught fire. Suddenly, passengers who had been peacefully sleeping woke to confusion and terror. The calm of the cabin had turned into panic. The plane now had just one engine left, and still hundreds of kilometers to cover. The descent began. Emergency crews on Terceira Island scrambled into action, preparing for a possible crash. With just 240 kilometers to go, the aircraft had only 600 kilograms of fuel left. And then, Engine 1 failed too. Flight 236 was now gliding silently over the Atlantic. No engines, no power, no second chances. In the cockpit, critical systems went dark. But the aircraft's ram air turbine deployed, using the rush of air to power just enough controls to keep flying. At this point, they were 30,000 feet high, with 120 kilometers left to glide. Inside the cabin, there was utter silence. Not the calm kind, but the terrifying, dreadful kind. The crew began preparing the passengers for a water landing, and that's where things could go from bad to worse. Because even if passengers survived the impact, they could drown or succumb to hypothermia in the freezing Atlantic waters. The pilots manually controlled the pitch, desperately trying to keep the aircraft stable. It was dropping at 2,000 feet per minute. They had about 15 minutes left. 15 minutes to make it or to vanish into the sea. As they approached 15 kilometers from the runway, the aircraft was still at 13,000 feet, way too high. If they dived, they'd hit the ground too fast. So the captain made a bold move, a 360-degree turn to lose altitude. It worked. They were now at 5,000 feet and aligned with the runway. Still too high. So he performed a series of S-turns, bleeding off more altitude while keeping the airport in view. But remember, there were no engines, no thrust, no second attempt, just one shot. The runway came into view. The plane descended, touched down with a violent impact. 8 tires exploded. The aircraft skidded, struggling to stop. Finally, it came to a halt. A fire broke out in the landing gear, but the emergency teams were already in position. They extinguished it quickly. Flight 236 had done the impossible. It holds the world record for the longest gliding distance of a commercial airliner without engine power, nearly 120 kilometers. The investigation later found the cause. Before takeoff in Toronto, a part in the right engine was replaced, but the part didn't belong to that engine model. It fit loosely, caused vibration, and ruptured the fuel line. After this incident, Airbus introduced a new monitoring system to alert pilots about future leaks. And as for the crew, Captain Robert Piché and First Officer Dirk Dejager received the Superior Airmanship Award, honoring their bravery and exceptional flying skills. They didn't just land a plane that had no power. They saved 306 lives.